Welcome to Simple Healthy Life, where our goal is to have real, insightful conversations on topics that we find interesting. And today, I think we have a really interesting one. Obviously, we were just riffing back and forth on this topic, but imagination and Carl Jung's active imagination and really the subconscious in general, as it's believed and described by Carl Jung and many others as being like an important factor in understanding ourselves. But the first question that I have for you, and I think I bring this up because a lot of people are, maybe a little like skeptical of this kind of idea, like imagination meaning something. Do dreams mean anything?
It's always interesting when we get these questions, especially in times when, actually this Sunday specifically, I didn't sleep a wink.
No.
And we haven't talked about this, but you didn't know this. Not one wink. I was actively dreaming the entire night. And I thought about like why that was. I was thinking about like the food I ate before and all that, the stuff that like makes sense to me, but I really have no idea. But I can tell you that from my perspective, when I remember a dream, I'm almost always looking for some type of reasoning behind it. So I'm going to say that they do mean something.
Yeah.
I don't know what. And I think that you can like look up like, if you're falling in your dream, you can Google like, what does that mean specifically, right? And I think you get like 15 different answers. So I'm going to say my official answer is they definitely mean something, and they are some type of messaging from yourself to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the reason why I asked that is because even if you weren't looking for meaning, I think it's pretty clearly there. If not all dreams, then at least some of them are pretty clear, right? Like you have a rough day and then you go to bed and you have nightmares on the exact thing that you experience, or your future fears or whatever, masked in some sort of symbolism. To me, I think it's pretty obvious. Like your brain is communicating something subconsciously, and I think it's pretty naive to think that it doesn't mean anything at all. I'm okay with people arguing the utility of that. Like, is there utility in finding meaning there? But I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that there's some meaning. It's not complete gibberish.
No. Well, I think we talked about this a little bit. The book, The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. We talked about this or no? On the podcast a little bit.
A little bit.
So essentially what he talks about is like, he interviewed a whole bunch of very successful people like the Carnegies, the Fords, like this was written back in the 50s and 60s. And, they all had the same stuff in common, right? And part of it was imagination. They all essentially realized that in order to become uber wealthy, you had to convince yourself, you had to imagine yourself, you had to hold this vision of yourself in your mind of what that would look like in order to create a path to get there.
Yeah.
And, I tell you this now because when I think about dreams, he breaks down your imagination into like two specific things. He talks about synthetic imagination and then creative imagination. So, for those of us that are like kind of on the fence about dreams, I'll offer you this. Synthetic imagination is described, at least by him, as kind of like taking all of the information that you've already had and like reimagining it, reorganizing it. Like, so in a dream, you might be like in a mall that you've been in before, but like with someone you never went to the mall with, right? And then all of a sudden there's a dog that you've seen before, right? And a clown that maybe you've never seen. And, all of these things are essentially just your brain. I'm not going to say just, but it's your brain synthetically putting these things together in different order. And then there's creative imagination. And I think what I'm more interested in, and most people are probably more interested in this topic, is like the muse, or like the true inventors that come up with stuff that's just never been ever thought of before. Right. Like, where does that stuff come from?
Yeah.
And I think in your dreams, you recognize the difference. And I mean, I can tell you from that night on Sunday when I was dreaming, like I had a dream where I was standing in water up to my knees, and there was all these kids, and they were like kind of looking for me to coach them a little bit, and which is a pretty like, that seems like a very synthetic thing. But then like post that, like I kind of like woke up and was like, wow, that was really vivid and real and weird. Like post that was like just this crazy sunrise. And I was like flying. Right. Those two dreams were not together. They were separate. Right? I wasn't just flying around. But so like, that's like one where I'm like, okay, I never flew before, like by myself or whatever, obviously on a plane. But like, so kind of an example of both synthetic and creative.
Right. Yeah. And so many people do have, dreams in which, or imaginations in which are creative and then really prosper from even that, like a simple idea. Like there's so many music examples too. We've talked about like Over the Rainbow and Stairway to Heaven. Both were like created in the dream world. And, I think that's like, I suppose one could then argue, well, that's somewhat synthetic because your brain is just like putting notes together. But I mean, you can't just put notes together and it sounds good. And you can't just put notes together randomly and then have it be, this cultural movement of some sort. I mean, Stairway to Heaven, like, come on, it comes from a dream, and it's like one of the most popular songs ever written. Like, that is an incredible feature of the brain.
Oh man, there's so many authors out there that when really pressed for like, how did you come up with this? They won't take credit. They'll say, it wasn't me. It just kind of flowed out through me onto the page. Like, if anybody's ever read The War of Art,
he talks about
like
that.
Pressfield talks about like the way he wrote his book was he would sit down and he would read the same passage to himself, and then he would go to work. And his work was essentially to sit there and write, just write and write and write and write and write. And he talks about the muse would eventually show up, and he knew that she would come and give him inspiration. And like, I mean, there's just so many examples of this. And this one of the things I wanted to talk about today was why, if there's so many examples of this, so we all dream, but we pretend like it's something that nobody does, or it's weird to talk about. We've had hundreds of examples, and now I bet if you wanted to, you could use ChatGPT to like list off 50 off the top of its head. I just personified ChatGPT. It's not the first time I'm going to do that. Of examples of people that like don't even take credit for the stuff they invented because of the muse. But why do we say this is taboo?
Or like it's childish of some. It's like it's got some childish. Some follish kind of quality to it.
Like, how about, just speaking of childish a little bit, like Walt Disney. I mean, this dude created Disney, right? He created Mickey Mouse. He created Walt Disney World. He did all of these things, and then he literally labeled them Imagineers. These people that worked with him were called the Imagineers.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that people recognize the importance of what that is. Like, what is our imagination? And obviously, or maybe not obvious, but well known at least, is that our conscious mind represents such a small fraction of our brain's total operations. Between 5 and 10% happens consciously, and 90 to 95% of everything that we're processing happens subconsciously. And that's quite interesting, because obviously, like, during a dream, you're not conscious. You're the exact opposite. And so like everything that comes up is totally, under the surface, so to speak, which was interesting, because then I started researching and looking up as to like, how do they know what percent of our brain that we're using? Of course, there's like scans and et cetera, but there's this one really cool study that I came across, and it was by a researcher named Benjamin Lebet in the 1980s, and essentially what he ended up studying was, I think he labeled it actually as like free will. And so what he did was he kind of set up this, this model of a study where he said, all right, I'm gonna put a couple different variables in place here, but when you want to move your wrist muscle, it was like specific to the wrist, like whenever you feel like doing that, just move your wrist, and then we'll set everything up so that we have, an EEG on your brain, and we're establishing conscious intent and everything. And essentially what he found out, long story short, is that the brain's motor cortex actually fired about 500 milliseconds prior to the person deciding consciously to move their wrist. So, and that's kind of interesting, because then that suggests that their subconscious mind actually said, all right, move your wrist, before the person actually got the message to say, all right, I'm going to move my wrist now. And
Oh, really?
so, and yeah, and then later on, of course, like, fMRI is now like a bit of a newer thing, but now they're finding the same exact thing with fMRI scans, that there are brain patterns that are suggestive of movement or action that happens seconds before that message actually reaches our conscious ability to like suggest intent. So
it's so funny, because it sounds so shocking, right? Like,
Mhm.
okay, like, wait a minute, like, I'm not deciding, like, subconsciously I'm deciding before. But I think about just like randomly where I'm like sitting in my car and I'm like, I think I'll go get a snack, right? Like,
right.
where did that come from?
And
Right?
that popped up moments before, seconds before it actually arose to your conscious.
Right. Something told me to go get a snack.
Mhm.
Like I will call it me,
Mhm.
because I would like to say I'm in control, but essentially, let's be honest, something before me told
Right.
me to go get a snack.
Right.
And that's like, and now we know that it's actually at the subconscious level.
Mhm.
I equal want snack all the time. But
Always.
like, it's pretty crazy how we know inherently that that's accurate.
Right.
And now they're starting to prove it.
Right. Yeah, they're proving that. And yeah, I mean, we've all been there, right? Like conversations, heated conversations, conflict, and then like you look back and you're like, I don't know why I said what I did or acted in the way that I did. There was a part of that was conscious, and there was a part of it, and I think in some of these research studies too, they kind of are suggestive that the conscious mind can act as act with like veto power in some sense, like, ooh, I want a snack, and then it's probably not the best time for a snack. So your conscious mind has like veto power over some of those things, which is great. But I guess in certain times, maybe more or less veto power, right? Like you're caught me in a weak moment, right? Like what does that mean? And point being here is that, I think that we were talking about it, like people think that imagination is something childish and not exactly real. But every new idea starts from imagination. Everything that you want to do in the future is all imagination. Your fears are like mostly imagination. There's almost nothing more real than imagination itself. And so, should we have a better relationship with that? And how do we cultivate a better relationship with imagination?
Well, first things first is, I think, the same thing we think about dreams. Right? Start with it's real,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's there for us. Our society downplays it, and we don't study it, but it's active and it's constant. I mean, I think essentially imagination is, at least in part, when we're in our default mode network. Right? When
Yeah,
we're
like
either
100%, I would say. Yeah.
So when we're thinking about the future or the past, right? Those are imaginations,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And let's face it, how often do we make the future anxious and the past depressing? Right? I wasn't as good as I remember being, or I'm not going to be as good in the future as I am right now. Those are 100% just our poor use of imagination. We take it and flip it, and now we start calling it visualization, right? Take it and flip it and start calling it manifestation. These are all different words for what is essentially imagination.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah. And one describes the power of vernacular linguistics, and it is so powerful. I hear you talk about these things, and just even like because we've talked so much, even like some of your delivery, the words that you specifically maybe unconsciously choose are carrying some intent there versus otherwise, right? Like the intention to call manifestation and imagination as like this positive thing versus rumination or anxiety as being the exact same action kind of, but just like carrying different intentions. And so I think that's super interesting.
I agree. And it's all essentially where it's like we have taken this superpower away from ourselves through distraction, right? Being too busy. We're too busy. We need to treat imagination as if something only kids do because we're too busy to live in that world. But yet we do it, right? We do the daydreaming. We all do the spacing out. We all do the rumination about the future and the past, and then claim to be too busy to sit and do like an active imagination session or a visualization session, because our society downplays it. Like if you're going to list the important things to do today. Well, first of all, making yourself happy would be way down the list, right? It's like work, got a project due, got to make sure the kids are fed, got to make sure that this, 11, 14, 20, and then go, okay, make myself happy. All right, spend 5 minutes alone. Okay, visualize. All right, I'll never get there.
Yeah, we're too grown up for childish imagination. We have anxiety.
I listened to this TED Talk recently, and it was really good. It was a gentleman who did a short video on essentially like how to make yourself happy, right? And it was he videoed an older person, very old, like near death, and he talked about having an appreciation for everything, right? The good and the bad. He specifically talked about the weather, right? We label the weather as good and bad. The weather is everything. The weather is every degree you can think of, every degree of humidity and dryness you can think of, every level of windy and not windy. It's changing constantly, but we label it as good or bad. Mm-hmm. And then what really shocked me was he interviewed this younger girl, and she talked about if you're given something to read or to watch, that is finite. That's okay. I read and I watched that. But if you get to play with your imagination, it can be anything. It could be all the things you're reading and watching, or it could be anything else. And that was from a younger person, really, identifying that your imagination is a huge part to what makes you happy.
Right.
And if we extrapolate that out for a second, it can be a huge part to what makes you sad. Right? If you spend all your time ruminating on why you look the way you look, or why you aren't the way you are, or why you wish you were this or that. And let's face it, we talk to people all the time that are upset about stuff that's never going to happen, and depressed about things that weren't nearly as bad as they're making them out to be.
Yeah, I mean it's so true. I see it all the time. People are ruminating or caught up on. I don't want to say they're mild things, but often they are. They're very mild, and their perspectives are just like a little skewed, and that causes them so much suffering. It's like, we have to get better at practicing more positive kind of imagination. And I don't even necessarily like positive psychology all that much. You know how I feel about that. Like I think all emotions are fine emotions, but there comes a point where people feed energy into negative perspectives and negative emotions, and they build habits that are centric to rumination versus building habits that are centric to imagination or visualization. And those are like mental habits, right? And I think that's a very real thing. You know, you know the people who are a little bit more likely to be grateful, or a little bit more likely to look on the bright side, or a little bit more likely to find solutions as opposed to, focusing on the problems, right? And those are not character traits. They're practice skills and habits, and it just, some people just provide a little bit more energy into them. I would say some people probably are more like, maybe they're just more inclined to do so naturally. But so many people work on that. I know that for a fact that I work on that. I know,
Right.
doesn't happen by accident. It's something that, it's a mental habit that I put energy into to help make my general perspectives on the day better. You'd mentioned something along the lines of like being grateful. We just like spent a lot of time out in nature this past week, and I would, every couple minutes I would sit there and I'd look around and be like, holy crap, this is like so cool, right? And was it like mind blowing? I mean, not really. I mean, it was like cool stuff, but I've seen all that stuff on the internet too. I've seen pictures of it. Granted, it's a little different in person, but I explicitly practice gratitude for what I was seeing and what I was experiencing. And if you were to do that and build up the mental habit of practicing that, I think that goes a long way, and it builds up a habit to doing so in the future as well.
Absolutely. It's definitely something that we can practice. And just saying that, hopefully our listeners are understanding, like, we're not telling you how to do it. We're not telling you what to do, but we are saying, like, we know for a fact it's something you can practice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then take some of these, like, it's interesting that you brought up the language, right? Like, sometimes we don't have the right words. And sometimes, for whatever reason, the right words have been attacked, right? Like, if I'm going to say to you, hey, listen, I want you to sit for 3 minutes. I'm going to start with your breath, slow down, put your phone aside, and I want you to visualize a door, right? That's all I want you to do. Just visualize the door. What's the door look like? Is it a door you've ever seen before? Good. Doesn't matter. And I want you to walk into the door, sit on the other side, and just whatever happens next, let it happen. Don't try to control it. Right? Whatever, if an emotion comes up, great. If a visual aspect comes up, awesome. And set your timer. And then when the 3 minutes is over, tell yourself, okay, guess what I did today? I did a 3-minute visualization. And just see what it is. And you can start to recognize that these small steps will lead you down this path of being able to use your imagination, and now using your imagination for a positive outcome for you. Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, I referenced it already, right? The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. Like, every one of these super powerful men at the time, because this was the 50s, mm-hmm. They all talked about it. They all said, we started with our imagination. We visualized what needed to happen. And then we started to develop a plan around how we can get there. Mm-hmm. No, it's not going to be easy. No, it's not going to be comfortable. Mm-hmm. No, you don't have control over a lot of it. But allowing yourself to try is a huge step, mm-hmm. right? Pushing away societal norms that say you're just wasting your time. Go back to scrolling through the internet, right? You're just wasting your time. Make sure you get your project done, right? All these people talk about they're not happy because they're too busy. They have all this stuff, and we're giving them now at least a little bit of like a, hey, what do you think will happen at the end of that 3 minutes? Like, really, I know that it's a kind of a loaded question because you've done the exercises, but like, what do you think will happen for somebody that sits down, sets their alarm for 3 minutes, uses their breath, and then allows themselves to visualize a positive outcome in their life for 3 minutes? What do you think happens?
Yep. I think that for a lot of people, they're going to be able to do that. And I think that something's going to happen. I think for a good set of those people, they're going to say, well, I just made that up. I'm just created whatever, and that means nothing. And I think for some people, they're going to slip, and then they're going to ruminate on negative things. They're going to be aiming high, and they're going to be falling short of that. And then we actually ruminating on everything bad. And
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's well said. All three of those things are very likely to happen. And even more so, just so we're all clear, the same person could do this exercise 3 times, and all three of those things could happen. The third time, all of a sudden, you could be ruminating the entire 3 minutes and then, come out of it and be like, well, that was whatever, right? But knowing that and recognizing that those are real, those are all normal brain behavior, it's a great start.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, great. Like 3 more minutes. Tomorrow, 3 minutes. The next day, 3 minutes. Right. We talk about it all the time, right? Checking in with yourself. Just what am I actually feeling? How does this actually feel today? What can I do to make it better? Right. It's just another example of you have control. You have the power to control your happiness. It all starts within. And imagination, visualizing yourself that way, is a huge aspect to that. And yes, we have this negative bias. Yes, it will feel funky. It'll feel super easy. If I told you to close your eyes and just think about all the stuff that could go wrong, you would be like, I did it.
I'm an expert.
I'm super good at this. Wow, I wish there was someone that would pay me to do that, right? Because that's our negative bias, right? We have it. It's real. Keeps us safe. We're evolved into it. But if we want to work on changing it for a positive, you got to do the work.
Right.
You got to believe that your imagination was a gift. I mean, one of the things I was just reading about was AI, right? I'm fascinated by it right now. And essentially what they're saying now, and I hope this is true, is AI is only going to have synthetic imagination. Right. It's only going to have, it will have every single option available to it, but it can only take every single option and put it in together differently. Like if you were like, hey, AI, do me a favor, right? I personified and asked it nicely. Hopefully they're listening. All right, do me a favor and build me like a new world. It's only going to take all of the stuff that we inputted into it and then rearrange it.
Right.
It's not going to be able to imagine what we can imagine.
Right.
And that, I think, is such a powerful thing to realize, that when you start to downplay it or listen to society downplay it or listen to society downplay manifestation or whatever the case may be, right? You start to realize like, wow, we have this gift. And what I think, so I've been saying this a lot lately, like some people call it manifestation. Some people call it prayer, right? Some people call it the placebo effect. Some people call it the muse. Nobody's saying it doesn't exist. Right? Like there's nobody that's listening to this podcast that says, no way, like Einstein created the theory of relativity, right? Like there's no, like, I mean, we just, Ford like created cars. Like, okay, well, how? Like, where did it come from?
Yeah. It came from somewhere, and I think it's a good practice, and the door visualization kind of exercise you described is very, very similar to what Carl Jung's description of active imagination. And active imagination was a strategy developed just for that, to like improve your ability to visualize and manifest, if that's the word you like, or to better understand oneself too, so that maybe you can make those those other things a little bit easier. He formally released that idea in 1913, so a little while ago. And for those of you who think that's ancient, well, tune back into those other podcasts on how some of our dietary standards got formalized around 1913. So not as
shameless plug.
Yeah, not as ancient as you might think. And
seed oils are still good for you.
Right. So this was around the early 1900s, and basically the process is very much the same. In what he would say was, you go and you sit down in a quiet space, and you have a conversation with yourself. You have a conversation with whatever pops up. And through that conversation, through this active imagination where the conscious mind is having input too during this, you have literally a conversation, you write it down or whatever, and then you can kind of look back on it and analyze themes and archetypes and symbols, and start to figure out what it is that you might need or might want or desire or might need to work on or whatever it is. There's actually this funny story because he started doing this with clients. And so then there was this one client who came in and wanted to start working with him. So he goes and he works with him, and every week coming in with these like really vivid, active imagination kind of like dialogue things that he had written down. And, week after week goes by, and eventually he comes in one day and he's like, "Yeah, see, Mr. Young, I was making it up all along. This didn't actually happen. I fooled you, and we've spent all this time analyzing everything, and all I did was make it up. And so, joke's on you." And then, of course, like Carl Jung is like, "Well, where did it come from?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know. I just made it up." And he's like, "Exactly. Like, that's the point. It has to come from somewhere. It's not coming from your dog. It came from your brain. Like
Right.
your active imagination made that up." And that's the point. The point isn't necessarily to like create the most wild thing on the planet, obviously, but is to engage in dialogue with that unconscious, and then to formulate some relationship with that, so then you can start to understand things. And then, so actually then that client then went on and they continued to analyze things, and things were always like, I mean, at least from accounts of Jung, is that they were pretty helpful to know where some of those like ideas came up, or where some of those, active imagination kind of themes, where those directed him. So I thought that was super interesting. But that is a strategy that someone can use. They can sit down and they can, close their eyes, and they can just like find the first thing that appears with them, and then start to engage with that, like talk to that. It's not very weird. We talk to ourselves all the time, right? Like, "Oh, I'm going to do this."
Oh, inner chatter's all there all the
Right.
time.
Right. So it's not much different than that. It's not much different than like going and talking to yourself. You're just talking to like whatever comes. And then you might find that, hey, there's a little conscious input, and then there's a little unconscious input. Something just pops up and you're like, "Oh, I don't know where that came from." But Carl Jung would suggest writing this down. Take 30 minutes and write it down. And one good strategy that I heard for that is like sit in front of a quiet like computer and have a notepad up, and then visualize your whatever, and then whatever pops up, whatever image or figure or whatever appears, write it down in write what it says, or the dialogue from that object, in caps, and then you write in lowercase. So you say, "Well, I visualize this object, and he or she says blah 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 blah." So you type that in caps, and then you write a question back. Well, what did you mean by blah blah blah? And you have that in lowercase, and then that way you can differentiate when you look back as to like what the conversation is looking like, in terms of what's more like imagination, kind of like subconscious, versus what is more you conscious input. So I thought that was interesting.
Super. And it goes back to this, like, I think it'll help people if people are listening to this and they're like, "All right, I'm going to try." I think that story you just said, like, yeah, it's going to be you making it up.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Don't let your ego get in the way, right? And Alan Watts, everybody listens to this knows, is my favorite. He talks about the ego being like the robbers, and the cops come in, and what do the robbers do? They go from the first floor to the second floor. And the cops go to the second floor, they go to the third floor, right? And then they go out the window and down the back, and you're constantly chasing what essentially is your ego. And your ego is constantly going to tell you, "This is stupid. It's brand new. I don't like it." "Okay, fine." And then we'll go, "Okay, well, don't worry about that. Just make it up," right? And they go, "No, that's not right." Somehow, right? Like, first thing that comes into your head, dinosaurs. Like, no, that's not right. Can't be, right? Obviously, it can't be dinosaurs. They don't exist. But, but like, whatever it is, recognize that that's okay, right? Don't worry about it. Like, that's a problem for another day, right? Just write it down. Okay, next. And if your brain does what mine does, go, "All right, I'm going to think about this." And like, something else. Okay, fine, perfect. Write down something else, right? And don't feel like you're chasing. Just write it down. See what happens. And these processes will eventually help you to understand the truth, right? This imagination that we have is a gift.
Yeah.
It's from somebody else somewhere, right? If you want to call it God, by more power to you.
Yeah.
But it's something that other entities on the planet don't have, and we have it. So let's stop downplaying it. Let's start using it. And we listed quite a few books, right? That Carl Jung's The Red Book. If you want the kind of the psychologist perspective, The Law of Success. If you want kind of the business perspective, Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. If you want kind of the artistic perspective, right? These are all saying the same thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's great practice. And, so many examples again of like, you need that creativity to then do anything that is worthwhile. Maybe we maybe can't control certain emotions, but maybe we can control meaning. And so, coming from someone just as yourself who has brought imagination to life in our labs and created, that started from a thought, started from, actively worked on the idea and brought that to life. But you did that with a business. People do that with art. People do that with music. People do that with painting and sculptures, and people do that with relationships, with how they view themselves. They do that with their health. It all starts from like, what if it looked differently? And what does that looking differently actually mean? It's some image.
What if I told you that everybody, including us and the people listening, are doing that right now?
Always.
You have imagined your life. Whether you think like, no, I would never have imagined it this way. Well, guess what? By not choosing to use your imagination, you have essentially imagined your life this way. And there are so many examples of people that make the decision to imagine their life differently and make the change and spend the time and do it different. And I'm not saying all of a sudden you go from a family of 5 to just, traveling the world by yourself. But I am saying, like, if there's something in your life that, like, you could use a change on, start by imagining what it looks like to be changed. Start by having that conversation with yourself. Start by writing it down in caps when you respond. I could never do that. Okay, write that down. Right? Just spend the time. Spend a little bit of time. I don't think there's any more valuable way you could spend your time. And don't let society, the social norm of people that are unhappy, tell you that there's not possible because because they don't want to see the change or they can't do it. We're here telling you right now that it can be done. It is done. And imagination is a huge aspect of it.
Right. And all we're suggesting is just etch it out, right? Like, you already do it anyways. You're doing it right now. Etch it out in your head, in your mind, on a notebook. Have the conversation instead of passively dreaming about it. Etch it out and then take your actions. Plenty of past conversations on actions too, but I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So, if you enjoyed the conversation, please give us a follow on Spotify. I think that helps with the algorithm a little bit. So I know there are plenty of active listeners, so some of you aren't following. So please give a follow. I think that helps out a bit. And if you want to hear more, you can find all of our other podcasts on YouTube and Spotify and online, most other podcast platforms. And then let us know if there's a topic that you want to hear about, and we'll catch you next time.